I think that we will begin. Welcome to our presentation today. Top down, bottom up, aligning policy and practices for shared services. My name is Karla Houghtalin. I'm a program manager at Southwest Human Development. I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves.
My name's Lanae Thomas. I'm a director at Zion Early Learning Academy in Phoenix, Arizona.
And hi, I'm Lela Wendell. I am the CCDF State Administrator in Arizona.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for being here with us in this last breakout session. This is a presentation, actually a webinar that we did for NECE a bit ago. And so we've got some additional slides that Louise did that we will go through. But we thought before we began, so that we can have a robust conversation, we kind of poll the room so that we could speak specifically to your needs. So first, we're looking for state administrators. Do we have any state administrators in the room? Okay, awesome. How about any boots on the ground providers providing services, nonprofits, the administrators of contracts? And then how about any providers like Lanae doing the work? Awesome, awesome. Who else? Who else is in the room?
I work for the Federal TA Center for Child Care Administrators.
Great, great. That is not a topic that we had to ask, to ask about. So I'm like, that wasn't a category. Awesome, thank you. Yes.
With Save the Children, we fund child care post-disaster.
Great, welcome, thank you. Anybody else that we
Child
missed?
Care Resource and Referral Network.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, yes.
United Way for Greater Austin.
Another way. Awesome,
We're a vendor.
great,
Lela.
perfect, perfect. Vendor, that was the other category we hadn't mentioned. Anybody else that we've missed? Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. This is how they said it would work. Maybe the arrow button, yeah, keyboard. Well, I might have to, that was. Okay, well, we'll just do that. So I just want to go over our agenda really quickly. This first section of slides, what's broken in ECE, how technology can address. These were the slides that Louise did during the webinar. And we'll kind of break this down into sections. We'll do the first section of the agenda, see if you have any questions. Then I will talk about specifically what we've been doing in Arizona and our work with DES. We'll pause for any questions. Then Lanae is going to talk about her provider experience. She has so graciously said that she'd be happy to answer your questions. And then we'll turn it over to Lela for her to finish it up with the work that the amazing work the state is doing to become automated and innovated. And then we can just have a discussion. Does that sound great for everyone? We'll just go that route, try to make this casual. We're all tired, including me. All right. So again, I'm trying to find Louise's voice and still be authentic for these first set of slides. So again, I don't have to tell any of you that before the pandemic, we had a broken system and our system continues to be broken, but it was broken even before the pandemic. But we know since the pandemic, but we all knew that, right? And maybe other people didn't. And since the pandemic, it's made financial stability even harder. It's a bigger challenge, but now people are paying attention. So the hope for Opportunities Exchange is that they can take this tragedy and make it an opportunity to reinvent the industry. So I don't know how many of you saw their brief, Reinvent versus Rebuild. Let's fix the childcare system. If you haven't, I encourage you to do so. In that, Opportunities Exchange names 5 game changers for the field. In our presentation today, we're going to focus on 3 of those: the automation and business coaching, administrative scale, and then that real-time supply and demand data. And interestingly enough, in a sector that really needs automation. We're one of the last sectors in this US economy to benefit from a technology transformation. And this is our time to capitalize and get with the new century. So what Opportunity Exchange guesstimated is that pre-pandemic, less than 30% of ECE providers used automated CCMS. And I would tell you from boots on the ground folks, I would echo that. And I would even say that it is probably lower, that they might have had it and were using it. They're using it slightly, right? I'm gonna just use it to check staff in and out. I am gonna use it just to message parents, and that's a lot of money to put in for not fully utilizing a system. But the crisis didn't just change our providers, our early care and education leaders. It changed us, right? We all got tech savvy real quick. We learned how to use Zoom, touchless check-ins for providers, electronic banking. If people weren't electronic banking before, they were now. And we all became pretty, I mean, we can all share a screen on Zoom now. We can operate a chat. And so we're ready and we can do it. It encouraged technology, and now we can capitalize that and pandemic relief funds to build a stronger tech savvy, more sustainable sector. Because they deserve it. So you've seen this slide. If you've done any work or been part of any Opportunities Exchange sessions, you have seen this slide, and that their work and their belief that it's a pedagogical leadership. We really should take a poll of how every person says that word and how different and how often we practice before we say it, right? And all of the things that encompasses it in the box below. And then adding business leadership, which we're now really understanding in this industry, in this sector, in this field, is so important. And that to really, really capture and teach and be proficient in. And that's that full enrollment, that full fee collection, knowing that cost per child by age, fundraising and blended funding opportunities, that reporting, which is essential in providers understanding to make those data-driven decisions, being compliant to our regulators, all of those together making that high quality early care and education experience. And I love the graphic of this one. I'm stealing. I think it's great because we see it and we feel it. Like, do you see that picture? And we feel it. Like, it's the literal overwhelm. I know Lanae feels it because she's been getting calls the whole time she's been in this conference about alarms and calling out staff, and like she feels it and we feel it for her. And we do try to solve it with just a one and done training, right? Funders like us to do it in one and done because that feels good. Like, give them business training and and they'll have those hours. They can, I don't know if you have registries, we have registries, and then we can say we gave them what we need. But Opportunity Exchange knows that that's not sufficient, and we know it's not sufficient. And so we need to give them more. And so we believe, Opportunity Exchange believes that business coaching linked with automation has better outcomes, and that right now, again, that funding for technology and licenses and hardware is needed for our providers. There is a lot of talk about scaffolding costs. There's been a lot in these about having providers pay just a little. And I love that idea in the long term, but when we're asking to see their data and we're using their data, we should pay for their systems. And then this cool little graphic, it comes from something called the forgetting curve. Louise said, you can Google it, but we all have this experience, right? We know. And some of that will happen here, right? If we don't keep these conversations going, as we go to a great training, we get great information, and then we fall asleep and, it's gone. Well, of course, the same things happen to our early care and education leaders. So we have to give them sustainable business practices and walk hand by hand with them, find out what's important to them until they feel comfortable. And oops, I think I skipped one, didn't I? Okay, so we've seen the iron triangle. We know Opportunities Exchange, iron triangle. I personally am a big fan. We know that for sustainability, providers need to be fully enrolled, collect all of their fees, and know what their revenues, to have their revenues cover their per child cost. And at Southwest Human Development, we believe that we have a responsibility for the sustainability of childcare, especially high quality programs, because there's nothing worse than losing a high quality program because they can't be financially sustainable. And so the Iron Triangle helps to do that. And what's even cooler is we can do great spreadsheets where they can collect that data, and that's time consuming and that doesn't save them time, although necessary. Or we can partner with a child care management system and that data can be collected for them. And so the Iron Triangle can be, and we should hold our software vendors to providing those reports and data that our early care and education leaders can see how their full enrollment looks. How are they collecting all of their fees on time every time? Is the system helping them collect those fees so that they can be the happy smiley face, not the, I need your $200 today or you're out of here, right? Like it's just so nice it doesn't work for you. And then managing those student ratios, generating financial reports, all of that can be provided to our providers through a child care management system. And like I said earlier, this is an amazing way to cut their time, their administrative time. And when we're worried about, in a time when we're worried about staffing, our precious resources of our children and our staff need to be in the nurturing and education of those children. So what Opportunities Exchange has found that works is strategic business coaching linked to software designed for our early care and education businesses. And so some of the benefits, it does save time. It doesn't at first. Let's be transparent. It takes time to get your stuff entered into your system. It takes time to teach your teachers. It takes time to learn. It takes time to teach your parents. And then there's time savings. It does save money because we reduce that labor, pull it off those administrative tasks and into our teachers. We can get an increase in revenue through those automated payments and reduce that bad debt. And that data that we can collect can be analyzed and it can inform those data-driven decisions in our businesses. With the hope, because while we do want to be profitable, we also, the hope is that those dollars will be reinvested into their quality programs. So here's some data that Opportunities Exchange collected from a program out of Georgia that has been going for a while. This is pre-COVID data, so I'm going to be really clear about that. The average bad debt was a little over $52,000 per program. Most of the sites were not fully enrolled, did not have procedures in place to track and boost their enrollment, and none of them were using any kind of automated system. 11 months later, the average bad debt was $877 per program. And because of the automated system, they can flag and address problems before the debt accumulates. They were able to fill vacancies. So their enrollment grew by 34% and their overall revenue increased by 24%. And because Louise knew that many of you are working with family childcare programs, she created this budget. This is not actual data. So I wanted to make sure I'm transparent about this. This is just a sample of what they have seen out in the field. And as you can see, the top percent of the bad debt at 15%. Oftentimes we see higher than that, 25, 50% of uncollected tuition and fees. Subsidy payments, because it's very difficult sometimes for family childcare providers to ask their friends, people that are close to them, people that are like family, for money. So often that debt is not paid, but using having business leadership and using a CCMS, it can bring that bad debt down to 0%. So in just a minute, I'm going to talk to you about what we're doing in Arizona. And again, full transparency, we're in our toddler state and we are doing a lot of pivoting because as we learn from providers, as we learn from people smarter than us, as I learn from my staff and their experience in the field, we make those pivots necessary so we can have a quality program for our early care and education leaders. And then Lela will talk about ARPA dollars, how it's going to be invested in reform and state level investments. But before I go into more about Arizona, let's take a break from my voice that you don't want to hear anymore. And any questions that far about the slides from Louise? We good? I feel like we've all seen them a whole lot, right? Okay.
Karla, I'd like to add a couple things. As I was looking at these slides, there's just a lot of reflections that I've had from yesterday. Yesterday was a long day. It feels like a week almost. But a lot of information where I think every time we revisit the triangle or these pillars or these pieces, like there's a new level of complexity because maybe we've solved one problem or we know how to handle that thing. There's another one. And I think like, in the Iron Triangle, state agencies, CCDF, lead agencies have a responsibility on that revenue piece of that triangle. So if our rates aren't really reimbursing at that cost of quality, like what are we expecting? And if our QRIS is expecting all these things that cost so much more than what we're able to support, knowing that families can't afford that, there's a real responsibility there. And so to see like the bad debt example in Atlanta, like $52,000 per program of bad debt, that makes me think, so right now the child care stabilization grants that are going to providers, that's probably just covering their bad debt. That's not like getting us to the higher qualities. So without that stewardship of how to get rid of that bad debt, how are we going to increase quality? So these have been just a lot of ahas and wondering if anyone in the room has also had those this last day that they'd like to share. Yeah.
One thing that occurs to me over and over is just the circular search for money amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear a lot more talk about siphoning money back down from the top in whatever way, but just the constant continual acknowledgement, start every statement with, there's not enough money down here, but we're gonna, do these things to help ourselves anyway, until, we're actually getting the money that we've already earned,
Yeah. And I think about that, like we all hear from, state administrators that childcare providers are afraid to increase wages. They're afraid, like what's going to happen if that money runs out? What's going to happen if we return it? Like what if we don't spend it? There's a risk there too. But with business practices training, to have data and to be able to forecast out a budget, there's some, reassurance that there could be a plan. So, if we have to dial this back, like Arizona commits to working with our partners and our providers to be as clear in advance of that transition if we have to get there. But our goal is, and I'm so optimistic, is that we're showing it works. We increase our wages, we are able to achieve that quality, we're able to address the supply gaps, and then it's like, well, of course, this has to be continued. But I think you're right. And that's kind of our challenge too, is how do we get that money to where it's needed? But seeing that bad debt number, that really made me think, like we really have to learn the way that we change things. I love that. Thank you.
And I think what's amazing here in Arizona is that we have built relationships. So this is an authentic relationship that you are looking at, because oftentimes providers would be really afraid to talk to their state subsidy administrator and talk about challenges or payments or how difficult sometimes processing can be. And so I think what has been unique and great is that we have worked really hard to build a relationship and then be a liaison and help be a voice. And then providers then become a courage, it's kind of scaffolds, and then they can be their own voice. And so that is an exciting part about this process as well, is we can say to a state administrator, we need your help, we need your dollars. Here's the work that we can do, here's the knowledge we can bring to this field, and we want to. And then they can really look at that and say yes. And we know that that's unique. That's why we wanted to talk about it today, because it has been a miracle, and the providers have benefited and are continuing to benefit. All right, anything else? And I'll move on. I'll tell you a little bit about our program here in Arizona. Not here in Arizona. Here in Arizona. Told you I was tired. Okay. All right, so our program, we all have our names. Our CEO gave us this name and it's stuck. Early Childhood Business Management Program, or ECBMP, like my staff likes to call it. And so that is the name of our coaching program at Southwest Human Development that really started out just as a coaching program and is transforming to many things, which I want to tell you a little bit about. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide, because what I really want to tell you is about our program, because I think you might find that interesting. But we did start out with our first pilot of 13 providers that were pre-chosen through a pilot our quality improvement system was doing, and they pre-selected 13 providers. We worked with them, provided a CCMS. This started in September of 2019. What would happen if you gave them some business coaching and some business training? And that's what we set to find out. And we were in person visiting, and COVID hit, and we were flying the plane as we were building it. And Lanae was one of the first ones to help fly the plane and build it with me. And COVID hit, and we turned this program virtual. And I really want to talk about that, one of those first successes, because we wondered what would happen if we couldn't sit next to them to work on math and business skills. And here's the interesting thing that we found. Something about the layer of that computer screen allowed people to be a little more vulnerable, to talk about their fears, to say, actually, I don't have a budget like I told you I had, or I don't know, and I don't understand those terms that you're using. Can you slow this down for me? Or can you show me what you're talking about? And so we found it's really successful. So I'll tell you, our program is a hybrid model. So in our traditional model that we're talking about today, we meet with providers for 12 months, twice a month for 1 hour each session, because we don't want to overwhelm them, but we don't want too much time to pass that they forget or that we can't reinforce a skill. And we do have a curriculum that we use. However, and Evie, my partner back there, will tell you, I'm really insistent that it stays individualized. So while we do want to have a structure for coaches, because coaches need that structure so that they're not overwhelmed, we want to be able to stop and pause if a provider needs to talk about something else. And so within that hour, we always say, what's been bubbling up? And how did that assignment go? Because we do give assignments, but all of our assignments are for the benefit of their business, not just, we got to collect this data from you. We want to help you collect some iron triangle data so you can make some data-driven decisions. We want you to enter this information, this CCMS, so you can start to track it. So we're very intentional. So, hey, what's bubbling up? And we work on that first, because they're the most important person in the room. And then we start to talk about content and terms and definitions and business skills and onboarding to a CCMS, fully being proficient. We always do a wrap up. The other cool thing that we have added is we do a monthly we call them a cohort meeting. Some people call them community learning, community practices, where we bring our whole group together. They can engage through chat and outside of chat to ask questions, to share experiences. But we bring a business professional from the community to talk to them. And oftentimes, this is the one and only time, or the first time, these providers have had access to these business professionals. And we have found it to be very successful. In upcoming projects, we're going to also initially introduce the upcoming topic so we can give an overview, and then the coaches have more time to embed that information. But we've had, so Southwest is a huge organization, 45 programs, over 1,000 staff. So we have access to some amazing professionals. Just want to tell you one quick story. Our HR director came to one of these cohort meetings and she just talked to them about basic HR things, one of those being sick pay and how that's required in the state of Arizona. I got a follow-up call from a provider that said, thank you so much for that cohort meeting. And this is from a program that's high in quality, quite stable, who said, I didn't know it was a law in Arizona to provide sick pay to our staff. So I went back and told the owner he has to provide sick pay, and I front loaded everybody's sick pay so that they will have it. So when we talk about scalability and impact, I'm going to say to you, that was one provider that touched 20 staff who now this year will have sick pay. That's real data. That's the work. And I'm really, really proud of that work. I'm proud of this partnership more than you will know with DES. We often, Arizona is not unique, but I am a third generation Arizonan and I know how it operates. Siloed. And if I could share, if I could share any messages to do this work effectively, we got to crash down the silos. It has been amazing because with this relationship, we also have a licensing, a different department that does the childcare licensing. We've now been able to say, look, we have this amazing relationship with DES, and now we're building that relationship. And we're working with other nonprofits and providers, and we're just doing some unique things that pivot. This isn't quite working, but I think we can make it work here. And so we're listening. I don't have all the answers, and I will never have all the answers. So we're doing a lot of listening. And we have 4 pillars because I'm really proud of these pillars, and it talks about those silo work. So I'm going to say that, and then we'll move on. But fully automated, proficient and fully automated. And so we can't do that alone. So we chose ProCare, and that is our partner. So not siloed, we have a partner. We are funded by DES, primarily partner, not siloed. We offer individualized coaching, not siloed. We have to have great leaders and we have to have great coaches. Evie has a team of phenomenal coaches and does an amazing training program for those folks, not siloed. We utilize, I think I said it earlier, the NACI equivalent in Arizona that our AZAYC holds the toolkit, the CCA for Good platform. We partner with them, not siloed. And because it has those vetted policies and procedures. And then that iron triangle, because that's what's unique. Childcare businesses are businesses and we want them to have business skills, but it's that business formula that makes that piece unique. Again, partnering with Opportunities Exchange, not siloed. So I think those partnerships are really, really important. How am I doing on time? I need to probably go through. So just a little bit, I'll just show it to you really quick. This is because we're still in this project. I thought you could look at our timeline. We do a very hands-on recruitment process. I think that that's one of the things that we've done well and is successful if you want another success. And we do fully transparent info sessions. Evie would say not quite transparent enough. So we're going to get better about that, really talking about responsibilities. I think in our first ones, we were like, these are all the things you're going to get. Come join us. And we maybe weren't as heavy on, and here's all the responsibilities. So we're going to get better at that. And then we started those intakes and started collecting data, onboarding, iron triangle metrics. And we had to slow down with the automation, and that's okay because we want them to be fully utilized. We had providers that are like, I watched the video, I got it. They were calling ProCare on their own. I am going to launch November 1. And we were like, nope. You got to have a good provider. You have to have a good relationship if you choose to do a CCMS with your CCMS provider, because what we found is they can have a training protocol, but they need to have one that works with your folks and your coaches at the speed, and not just them saying to you, here's how we do it. It's, oh, that's awesome. And here's how we need to do it. So let's work together. So with ProCare, we created a whole training plan, and our providers did not go ahead until they were ready to go ahead. Anyway, so now we're getting towards the end of our project, and I'm super excited for the data that we're going to be able to analyze. And I just thought it might be fun for you guys to see that the providers that we serve are the same ones that are reaching out to you. We have family childcare who are licensed through our state. We have some that are just certified through subsidy. We have a whole lot of centers, but these are mom and pop centers. Just like we've talked about, often those that serve less than 100 children that do not have the infrastructure like a big corporate chain would for some of those business skills. And we even had 2 small school districts who those directors wanted those business supports. We faith-based, for-profit, not-for-profit, Montessori programs, a very diverse group. Okay. And then because I've just barely started extracting data, I thought it might be fun for you to see the education levels. In Arizona, we do not require a college degree. You can see that the highest was some college, but what I found most interesting is those with degrees did not often have a degree in early care and education. So I thought that was kind of interesting. 58 of our 80 were already participating in a quality improvement system. 22 were not. That program has also since expanded, and many of those are now participating. So that's at the start. So that is a little bit about our program. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions at this point before I turn it over to Lanae.
So I was just curious, so this isn't a statewide program. In other words, you're not buying ProCare you're not making it mandatory for all the providers across the state. Is that?
So it's jumping a little bit to my presentation, but no, we're not going to mandate one CCMS. We'll have a process of vetting the CCMSs to make sure that they fit certain program accountability requirements that we have. But we really are learning that it depends on if a provider is already using one, I mean, that it's helpful. Like it's helpful to build on that. If they're not, then we're starting to segment, well, which CCMSs might be a better fit. Like depending if it's family childcare or a small center or, just other options or supports that maybe some CCMSs have. So we're really trying to not be prescriptive and not make requirements. Actually, our control tech partners helped us understand, do not require 100%. Do not make those things because it's a disincentive. You're going to upset provider communities. They may not be ready for it. So it's like, how do we get that early adopter crew on board? How do we expand that to 2/3 of providers? How do we keep increasing the percentage? Yeah.
So we did something similar pre-COVID here in Dallas, and we purchased one system for everyone. So we've learned that we can't require just one system. But one of the things that we found is that, we train on the system, and then the people that were trained leaves. And then you're just in a revolving door of, who gets what. So on your training that you have developed, is it an online training that anybody can work with? Or?
Not yet. We are working to get to that. Although I want to say, I think that has to be an and, not the only. I think it's a starting point. Here's a webinar, but to be sustainable, to be impactful, to be full utilization, many providers need that one-on-one. I'm going to walk with you through it. And I do want to also say that, we absolutely want to be agnostic to software, but we have also pulled providers in Arizona, and in Arizona, 2 platforms are used consistently, and that's Brightwell and ProCare. And they have a similar online platform. So that makes it really nice for our business management specialists because they can teeter back and forth. And again, we want to listen to providers and go and learn what they need us to learn, build capacity in staff, build capacity in providers. And so I think that we'll continue to see that even as other, vendors come onto the scene. That's great. We will continue. We'll make sure we build our capacity for them. But those are the 2 in Arizona that have been, that are the most used. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Lanae. She's going to talk a little bit about her experience and then answer your questions.
Morning, good morning. So when we first started working with Southwest Human Development, we were a pen and a paper, mom and pop daycare centers, you would call it. So we did a lot of our tracking on paper, which made it very difficult for us because there would be people who owed money. And one of the first things that I can remember Karla telling me when we started was she asked me, what is your goal? What do you guys intend? COVID had just hit. So we were in panic mode because we had centers around us shutting down left and right. And we were like, are we going to be next? Are we going to be next? And one of the things that she told us was with you guys having, we were doing what the CDC had said, which was making sure there were 10 kids in each classroom. And we were sometimes including ourselves. So as you can imagine, with parents leaving, parents at home now watching their kids, our enrollment dropped, which meant, okay, how are we going to sustain ourselves? What are we going to do? So Southwest came in at the perfect time to show us how to take our pen and paper and actually put it to automation, which helped us a lot because you don't realize when you're just doing the pen and paper, how many parents owe, how many parents are out there that have an outstanding bill. They created a way for us to have a conversation with those parents, which can be difficult when you're talking about money, because for me, I'm a parent myself. And so when I have a mother in my office and she's saying, hey, my job just let go 50 of us, and I don't know if I'm next. I don't know how I'm going to pay little Johnny's bill next week. That weighs on you heavily as a director because you still have to put that charge forward, but then you also worry about how is this parent going to make that bill. And some people will just say, well, it's their job to do it. But for me, as a director, I wanted to know, how are my parents going to survive during COVID? How are we going to survive as a center? How are we going to be sustainable? So one of the things going automation helped us do was reduce the time spent doing paperwork. We were able to automatically, when we first start, put all of our kids in. So like Karla said, it wasn't this easy thing where, okay, now you guys are gonna put everything into the computer and it's gonna magically be there. That was time consuming. So we had to take each one of our files, our toddlers, our preschoolers, and actually put all of those students into the program. What I will say is once we got those students into the program and we were able to see it on the computer, it helped because we were able to see what days the kids were attending, where we needed to staff, if we were going to be short in a classroom or not. We didn't have to call each classroom and say, okay, how many kids do you have? We were able to actually have a tablet. So let me back up a little bit. When we first started, they give you a tablet and you put it in each of your classrooms. That tablet will have all of your participants that are in the classrooms' names on it. And so that helped me as a director be able to say, okay, in the toddlers class, we got 6 students this morning. If one more student came in, then I knew I needed to call another teacher in. So that helped me a lot, reducing my time and time spent doing the paperwork. And also it helped me be able to call a staff member in versus waiting for 15, 20 minutes or calling them saying, hey, when can you show up? I was able to say, okay, I know I have a drop-in coming tomorrow. I already know I have 6 students in there. I'm going to need another teacher in there. So I was able to contact staff ahead of time and say, hey, can you work tomorrow? Are you good for tomorrow? Instead of waiting to the last minute. Another thing that going automation helped us do was improve communication with our parents. Like I said, having those heart-to-heart conversations with our parents about billing, it opened up a whole nother door for us. Conversations that we weren't having before that were affecting our parents, we were able to find out from them, okay, yes, I'm late with the bill, but I'm also struggling with car issues. So we were able to get resources in our community that may be able to help those parents. If those parents needed bus passes, if those parents needed gas in their vehicles, we were able, because everybody was struggling at the time with COVID, we were able to reach out to those resources directly in our community and say, hey, this is what our parents need. Do you think you'd be available to help with that? And so it helped us improve the communication with our parents, because when you're using the CCMS, they're able to contact you directly through the ProCare system. So ProCare is one of the systems that we use. We used Brightwell in the beginning, and then we switched over to ProCare. I love both products. One of the things that I love the most about being able to communicate with the parents is the accident reports. If something happens to a child, our staff is able to go right in, take a picture of the incident. So for instance, if little Johnny bumps his head, I'm a parent and I know how a bruise can be this small when it first happens. And then by the time this parent gets off work 6 hours later, Johnny's head is out to here. So if that parent is able to see that in the beginning, that, okay, you know what? Johnny had an accident. This is what was done for the accident. We gave him TLC, we gave him an ice pack, but we're letting you know that this happened at 11 o'clock. By the time that parent gets there at 5, if Johnny's head is out to here, they're not freaking out. So it helped in that communication piece where, okay, they're still looking at their child and they're hurt, but they know when this incident took place. If this kid is short of diapers or something, we're able to communicate instantly. If a parent is going to be late bringing their child in, we're able to contact them immediately. The best part of being able to communicate with the parents is them being able to see their bill. So from a director's point, we put their billing in, we pre-put the billing in. So that was one of the big things that we learned about billing, is if you're pre-billing your parents and they're seeing it before the bill even happens, it's giving them a chance to say, okay, this is what I need to do to make sure that bill is paid. So with us going just within a month of us joining, doing the CCMS, I saw a big difference in not only the communication with our parents, but our bills getting paid. A lot of those outstanding bills were not paid, I feel, because we as leadership, we weren't on top of collecting. And that helped us be able to collect and instantly see in an instant, like, hey, this person's not only 2 weeks behind, but they're actually 3-4 weeks behind. So it gave us a chance to go in and talk to our parents and say, hey, okay, this is how much Johnny's bill is. How much can you afford to pay? Because at the same time, we didn't want to lose those parents as you know, customers. We love our kids, especially if they've been there for a while and you've developed that relationship with those parents and they're willing to come to you and they're telling you, hey, this is where I'm struggling at, but this is where I need help at. We were able through the automated system to say, okay, your bill's 2 weeks behind, but how about we make this payment here and then we can start you off with payments to get the rest caught up. And that helped our parents out a lot because we were willing to work with them. And it also showed us as they were paying the bill, the extra $20, $30, it would bring their bill down and we were able to see it with the automation. The other thing that helped us out was learning the new knowledge and program management and staffing strategies. So I used to always go by just our ratio and say, okay, well, I know my preschool teacher, she can have 13 kids in there. So we're good. But with this automation, it helped me see that, okay, are you fully enrolled in that classroom, Lanae? Are you fully collecting in that classroom? And how much is it going to cost to fill each one of those seats up? So that helped us budget, especially during COVID. It helped us budget so much because we were able to say, okay, this is what we're spending with the food. This is what it's going to cost for each kid to come in here and then to feed those kids, because those are all things that you really don't think about at first. But with this automation, it made me like really reflect and think about, okay, is it worth little Johnny sitting in that seat? I mean, yes, I want this kid in this seat, but how much money are we forking out to have the student just sitting there? Are we making any money? Because as someone said before, I mean, let's be real. We want to make revenue at the same time. We're here to provide a service, but we want to make revenue. In order for us to sustain and be profitable, we have to make something. So it made us go back and look at how much we were charging our parents. And then at the same time, is it worth keeping that classroom open? If we had an infant classroom, and this helped us really go back and look at that infant classroom and say, okay, yes, they pay a higher amount for infants, but in reality, is it worth us having this classroom open if we can't afford to pay our staff to come in? And is the enrollment consistent? Having that automation also helped with us keeping our enrollment consistent, because we're able to let the parents know, hey, this is what time we close. If such and such is not here, some centers don't have a cutoff time. My center has a cutoff time. So if students aren't there by a certain time, that's our cutoff time. If you're not here, be here tomorrow. But it helped us because instead of us calling in another staff member and paying them to come in when there wasn't enough students, because we were expecting 16 students, but instead only maybe 12 showed up that day. Having that automation and that cutoff time helped us because parents were able to say, hey, Laura's not coming in today. We thought she was going to be there, but we have a doctor's appointment, so Laura's not there. That helped me be able to call that staff member that I originally scheduled to come in and say, hey, I don't need you to come in today because we're not going to have enough students. The other thing was the monthly reporting. It made it so much easier. When I tell you guys the monthly reporting mattered, when I first went into daycare, I just knew I had a passion for working with children. I never thought about the financial side of it, never thought about, okay, even when they first came on with offering Brightwheel to us, I was like, oh, this is going to be neat. We could take pictures of our kids, And so like they were saying, as a lot of people get the automated systems, they're only using them probably to take pictures, probably just to communicate with their parents. But I found from a director perspective that it's so much more. My teachers are able to do their lesson plans. And so what's cool is we were able to put our lesson plans into the system and then print them out. My teachers loved it because for us, being able to print out that report of, okay, these are our lesson plans, being able to see where we are, it mattered to us a lot. It reduced the paperwork time. So my teachers are able to go in there and actually put their lesson plans into the system and then print it out versus having to handwrite. And for years, we've handwritten lesson plans, and we all know it can be overwhelming. The monthly reporting, we got the stabilization grant. Every month, as you guys know, they ask if your center participates in it, there's a questionnaire. They ask you at the end of the month, how many kids? And they always go back to this question that kills me every time we do it. How many kids did you have in April of 2020? And I'm like, we're in 2022. How many kids did you have? What's the other question? How many kids did you have last month attending? So for me, doing the automation and being able to access those reports, oh my goodness, how much time does it save? It saves you a lot of time because you're able to just go straight to that. They have what's called an aging reports tab on there. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Because you're able to go on that tab and you're able, when you're doing your stabilization grant, you're able to say, okay, in attendance, this is how many kids we had last month. And you're able to put that down right away. So where I would have probably spent 30 minutes to an hour trying to backtrack and look through paperwork and find out all these things, I'm able to just go right into our ProCare system, pull that out and say, this is how many kids we had that attended last month. And so the monthly reporting has been easier. Also, we were going through a quality first accreditation. So that was on my mind. I was nervous for myself and my teachers because I'm like, okay, they're coming in and they're coming to see how we are as a center. So instantly I'm thinking of just the judgment of what they're going to think of our center. But when I tell you, using the automation helped because when they first come in, they're like, so how many kids do you have in the toddlers class? How many kids do you have in the preschool class? You're able to already have those reports ready for them with your kids' names, with your kids' ages on it. And so that helped the process go so much easier. And it was easy for us to go through all that. And we got accredited just this last month. I'm happy to report. And so with that, I'm pleased to say that we are, we got our stars, which I was happy about. But in getting our star rating, I didn't know, until they told me like, so you guys will get more money. So I was like, oh, really? And then they told us, and you guys will be able to get scholarships now. So I was like, that was another plus for us. So I feel like doing the CCMS, it really helped our center go from just the paper and pen and not really, we were focusing on more just providing that quality care, but it opened up a whole new door for us to be able to look at it from a financial point of how you're going to sustain your center. And like Karla said before, it's created relationships with us, with our, with DES, also with our surveyors that come through. It's created that relationship and it's opened up the relationship to where we know now that, okay, they can have access to the same data and pull these same reports that we have, and they're able to see it. So one of the things that I love about us doing ProCare is our parents are able to electronically sign. So I don't know for you guys, but for me, the books and you're looking through, like I said, I'm a parent. So for me, I look at it from a parent's point of view and then also from a director's point of view. As a parent, going to find my child's last name, it's an A. So she's right there at the top of the book. But I couldn't imagine for a parent that has a kid that's way in the T's or the R's and they're constantly having to go through all these papers, or you have 2 or 3 kids that you have to do, a kid in the toddlers class and then a kid in the preschool class. That can become overwhelming for some parents. And so for us as directors, also it became overwhelming because you have parents who miss the signature, or they may not sign the kid out, or they may just sign with their initials. Going through this program helped because as Karla moved up, she wasn't our coach anymore. I got Evie as a coach. And the way they approach it is, she says, okay, Lanae, we're going to look at your screen together. And I want you to look at all your parents that don't have a last name in there. Those are reasons that if those parents get subsidized paid for their childcare, DES won't pay you. That made me think like, wow, okay, but this is the first time that I can honestly say that I paid attention to those things because it was automated and I'm able to see my parents' signatures instantly. I'm able to say, okay, I didn't capture this parent's signature and I need to do something about it immediately versus waiting until the end of the month when we're collecting all of our papers, our sign in, sign out sheets out of those books. And then we're seeing those mistakes, or we're seeing that they didn't do this. With going automated, it's helping us because at the end of this month, we'll be able just to print one report and actually send it over to the state versus us having to go through all those pages and then submit them to them. We're able to, our parents, they love it. When I say love it, love it, love it, they love it. I get parents that come in and they're like, all I have to use is my phone. They're literally scanning over a QR code, putting in a 4-digit PIN, and then signing their kids, their first and last name. For parents, that has decreased, us going automated, has decreased their sign in, sign out time because we would have parents sitting there forever, it seemed like, trying to find their kid's name, or they have other parents coming in and they're like, oh my gosh. The other thing it helped us do was download our reports instantly. So if state was to come in and they say, okay, we need a report of how many kids were here on March 30th. We're able to instantly go to March 30th and it will show us the number of kids that was in attendance in the toddlers class, the number of kids that was there in attendance in the preschool class. You just don't know how much time being able to print that report has saved us. Or when we're able, the bank. The other thing is less time going to the bank. For me, I don't have to go to the bank. My CEO has to go to the bank, but because we went automated, she has not had to go to the bank because we've elected to not do offline payments. Whereas before, going automated, our parents, a lot of them would come in and we'd have a credit card machine up there. Now they can do everything online, which I love. And I am happy like to show them. I'm like, oh, bring your phone here. So you're just going to tap this, tap that. And then they're able to pay right there online. So for our center, less time going to the bank. We don't have to go to the bank at all when it comes to that. We're able to contact ProCare directly and speak to someone. What I did like was the onboarding process. Like Karla said, they didn't let us just go from, okay, now we're using Brightwell or now we're using ProCare and jump right into it. We did it step by step. So before my center could move on to another step, like I was saying, Evie was like, look here, these are the people who don't have last names in here. Let's get those parents' last names. Our parents are also able to go on to the system and they can see what we've put in. And if something is incorrect, they have the ability to correct it. And then that makes it easier for us to be able to print that out and compare it with our enrollment sheets. So if there's something on there that's different, we're able to go to the parent and say, okay, you have little Johnny's birthday as 2019, but in the system, it's saying he was born in 2018. So we're able to cross-reference and get those things taken care of. I told you before, it's easier for the payment processing for parents and then collecting outstanding balances. It's pretty much immediate because they're able to see it. Where versus before, a lot of parents, they didn't keep up with it. We were just keeping up with it. And then, like I said, a lot of things were pen and paper. So now we're able to see it immediately and say, okay, this is how much is due and what are we going to do about the payment? How are we going to make it happen? But overall, I love going automated. I think it's worked for our center. I didn't realize until today that a lot of centers weren't automated. But I think that's one of the biggest things is when you do get a coach, having someone that cares about your center. And that was one of the first questions that the Southwest Human Development team came in and Karla asked us, what are your goals? What do you want for your center? And like she said, a lot of times other things are on our minds as educators. Not saying that my mind wasn't on making money for the center because it was, but my mind was more on COVID just happened. I have a kindergartner at home. Is she going to be able to go to school? You know, how am I going to keep my teachers here? How am I going to keep the teachers staying and afloat and wanting to be engaged in the classroom with everything going on? That's where my mind was. And I love it that Karla and them came in, her team came in with an approach of how can we help you? Not this software is going to help you guys take it and just how are we going to help you? And every time we went from step 1 to step 2, they would come in and check and say, okay, there's been times, honestly, guys, that I've reached out to Evie, like, hey, I got a question. And it wouldn't even be time for us to meet. And she's right there like, okay, I'll be right there. Let's set up a Zoom call or let's set up some time to meet, and able to meet us and get that taken care of so that we weren't just going at this blindly. We actually had help. And so I really like going automated. I think it's a wonderful thing for the centers because you do learn how to sustain yourself and you do learn those numbers that you don't want to look at. It forces you to look at them, but it forces you to look at it in a good way. That's going to help your center in the end. So that's what going automated and working with Southwest Human Development has done for Zion.
I really don't even have to say much more than that. So I'm just going to go to one key slide here. I mean, it's important, again, as CCDF lead agencies to know our role in supporting everything Lanae just mentioned. It's important to define the what and the why, because I know in my role, it took me a year and a half to really understand ECE and the silos. And so we need to synthesize that in a way that our state leaders and other partners and business partners and communities understand the complexity in a simplified way. Currently, you know, it's a regulators driven system. Each regulator has their own portal, their own process, their own things that need to be followed. And in Arizona, we are still a paper-based process. So currently we have really 5 different systems where providers have to go into each one individually. And the dream that we're starting on is to really leverage that CCMS technology. So that, green triangle there, or I guess it's a diamond. The green diamond really shows, okay, everything that Lanae just mentioned should just automatically, magically interface with everyone else's systems. And I think a couple of things when we've boiled it down, we see 3 key areas. So comprehensive data, so that's really talking about centralized eligibility. So what does that mean? Our Quality First Scholarships eligibility should be under the same place as our CCDF subsidy, as our locally driven pre-K type programs, any sort of financial assistance for childcare, a centralized eligibility system where parents go to one place and we figure out the funding on the back end. Licensing, I think there's still definitely a need for the monitoring component of those key areas, and our DHS partners are working on a platform for that. And then the parent search portal. So, those are kind of the 3 areas that we're really driving to. And we've just started this year a partnership with Control Tech on starting phase 1, which would be attendance automation. So actually, Lanae, you won't even have to send paper reports to us. It's just going to happen. You'll click a button and that's it. So that's really the dream there. And again, I think we've got to update these value propositions with Lanae, like right here on this screen, to just get providers to understand what's in it for them. Again, not making it a requirement. Understanding how this really benefits families. So these are things, though, I'd say as CCRNRs or lead agencies or partners, think about how you're messaging this, get that change management piece out there, bring the awareness so that once this technology comes around, everybody's on board. Same with state administrators. And I think the biggest concern for us is we do have to report to the federal government how we're spending these dollars, how we're really supporting families and providers. And so by having all of this data, of enrollment, percent enrollment, that really helps us show that these dollars are being invested wisely and that there is a return on investment. And I think that's really key in sustaining funding long-term. And so that's what we have for you, that, top up, bottom down, working together approach. And we really appreciate everyone's time here today. Questions? I know we're over, so any questions? Well, thank you all for sitting tight.
Do we? I think we have till 12:30.
I thought it was 12:15. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. I totally was like, oh no, we're crunched for time. Okay, good. Well, then I'll back up a little bit. I apologize. Oh, we started at 11:15. Oh, thank you. I was so worried. Okay, well, apologize. Do you have any questions? Okay. How do you support providers who speak other languages? So this came in, and I'm not sure at what time that did, but so with Control Tech, we did build that in, that we need the CCMSs to be available in other languages. And I think we had that conversation as well in one of our breakout sessions, as far as, how are we communicating the needs to our CCMS partners. And I think that's where Opportunities Exchange is really helping in making sure that, again, when we look at the dream, that's really the slide. That's the slide to be on. How are we even improving the CCMSs to do more, right? So language accessibility. I attended a session yesterday about the CACFP, and I thought that was great. Like, how do you have CCMSs that are supporting the reporting requirements for the food program? And then I even thought in my mind, could you connect that to like an online Amazon cart that's ordering your groceries that are delivered, right? There's so many ways to think about if you had your meal plan and you knew what you needed and you could set it and it delivers every week. Like, how cool would that be? So, anyhow, these are the things that I think of. Huh?
Keep your milk inventory.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I have a background in continuous improvement. And so, there's that philosophy of inventory isn't a good thing to have. It's like, what do you have when you need it? And I think that's, always what's in my mind. So the CCMS, I'm like so excited first we have to just move away from paper and pens, but really thinking about then every other component that's possible. I do think for eligibility, some of the challenges that we have there is, again, system or regulator driven compliance. So we really have to take a step back and say, all right, what are our eligibility requirements across these programs? And the session I just attended before this is, well, what flexibility does a state really have in how eligibility processes are set up? What we write into our state plan. And it's those pieces that we haven't looked at in a while. So how do we sit down with our Head Start partners? How do we sit down with our QRIS partners and really say, are we providing comprehensive financial assistance to families and covering the cost of high quality care? And I think when you have those components, it's so much easier to go to your lawmakers and show that. We've had the opportunity to present to a couple of groups of community agencies and partners in Arizona, and to show the cost of providing high quality care just stops everyone in their tracks. I feel like that needs to be, a common thing to just hand out. So in our draft cost of quality study, high quality care at a 5-star rated program, which is, the top in our state for infant care for a month, is about $2,200. That's the cost of providing it. Then you think of, okay, well, what are we reimbursing? It's like half that. So, of course, then families that we serve, we know that, and again, I learned this from Louise, it was probably the most influential lesson when I first came into the role, is the price of care is driven by the incomes that your families have in those communities. So there's always going to be a role to support that gap because it is so expensive. But being able to share, why is it $2,200 for infants? Well, lower ratios is higher quality care. Most of the costs are staff and staff related. So I think it's just breaking it down. I think that's how we can get even more business partners in the community to just help understand and support childcare providers. So I really think the key is coming together around the eligibility piece and start unpacking it. Look at the market rate survey. Are we reimbursing for attendance versus enrollment? Arizona, currently we reimburse by attendance, but if we had data, when we have data that shows enrollment numbers, enrollment percentages staying high, it's so much easier for me to then advocate for enrollment-based subsidies. So, it's those little pieces that are super exciting. On the licensing front, we put providers in impossible situations, and I really think this is where shared services really helps. How can we create those shared services networks so that providers don't have to think about always keeping up with some really routine licensing requirements? It's just understood and it's built in. How do we use the AZ toolkit to allow providers to go in there and buy their health insurance, their liability insurance or health insurance selections for their staff? Or, how do we provide incentives or discounts on supplies that are needed a lot? We're even exploring how can we fund a credit for providers to have where they go on to the AZ toolkit and select the CCMS that they want to use. But on the back end, we're funding that. So it's like a one-stop shop that I think we really have to focus on: shared services, Arizona toolkit, how we're then maybe a provider isn't going to excel, but how do they meet and maintain licensing requirements? Like, we don't even set our childcare providers up for success, like of just meeting minimum requirements. And then of course, then we can dream about a parent search portal, right? Of like being able to now have all this information that's automated, that's up to date. And I'm super excited from yesterday, hearing all the opportunities to get like correct provider contact information. Supply and demand, just being able to have parents say, you know, I'd like to start my search out here. What's available? What supply is out there? Okay, maybe I want to narrow it down. Maybe I want to select somewhere closer to my work versus my home. Like, you know, just opportunities that right now they're calling our CCRNR mostly. They'll go on the website and they're asking for referrals, you know, blindly. We don't know if they have slots available or not. So we're sending parents out on, you know, kind of this crazy search when maybe within that time frame, if they can't find childcare, they've just lost their job. And now we put them in another cycle. So I think that's what's super cool about the parent portal side, and it keeps enrollment numbers up. So it just works for everybody. So just thinking about this again, I really feel like Lanae nailed this and we need to go through and really hone in on those key areas to get our childcare providers really bought in so that we don't have to make this a requirement. We definitely, I think, need to say it's going to be so much easier for you to report out on your monthly stabilization progress if you select a CCMS. And then, yeah, for families, we just spoke about this a lot, but I think this also helps us shift that conversation of, okay, so maybe, you know, child isn't attending as frequently, but we can sit down and really have those conversations about those barriers that parents or families might be experiencing. And we don't have time for that now. We don't allow or build in time or communication channels or rapport. And so I really think for families, this gets to, you know, more organized and focused, meaningful connections. And yeah, I mean, I spoke a lot about this here. I do want to share that as we're going through this process of attendance tracking and automation, and as we're looking at how we create a centralized eligibility process, I think it's really important for lead agencies to just understand program accountability. So what does that mean? How are we going to show that accountability with the direct service payments that go out? So that's definitely something where we're just making sure that we have our I's dotted and our T's crossed, and that we're really able to be solid in being able to say that this automation does not put at risk any sort of accountability. And in fact, it improves it. It improves accountability. And then on my team, we have an entire payment processing unit that that sends out 9 USPS boxes of billing sheets every month. Do you get those? How thick is it? It's like thick.
It's like thick.
Big manila envelopes, sometimes 2. So 9 boxes of those. It takes them a whole day to manually stuff the envelopes. Sometimes if there's a payment hold or something that needs to be, you know, then they have to put those on the side and they do a little highlight or add a note. And we have 1,700 providers that we do this for. And then we receive all of those back from providers, you know, all those billing documents.
Like lived experience.
Yes. And this team of 1 supervisor and 2 permanent staff, some temporary support as well, process those documents every month, keying it in to a mainframe system. And I mean, it's just incredible to think of what we can do to transform our internal workforce and how those resources could really be thought through differently of, you know, supporting providers in different ways. We also have that manual process of our contracts team will review the paper sign-in and sign-out sheets. So any new provider for the first 6 months, we review their paper sign-in and sign-out sheets and their billing. And so just the amount of time, it's like, where are we getting to that value add activity of really connecting with providers and understanding what their needs are? So I think that's like the thing I'm driving as a really positive thing for my internal team. And it is going to be a change for them as well. We're so used to doing the things the way that we always have. And so it's going to be such a huge shift to just get them on board. And how do we proactively create environments where providers are set up for success versus coming around after the fact and saying, you didn't do this correctly. Like there's got to be a better way. And yeah, then we can just open it up to questions. I feel so silly that I thought I had to run through my presentation in 3 minutes. But I think I could have ended in the 3 minutes. Any questions or?
Yeah, I wanted to hear from Lanae if you could talk a little more about like when you were in that phase, wasn't yet saving you time and you had to put a lot of work into it. What kept you going? What motivated you to want to go through that process of change?
Seeing the reduced paperwork for one, and actually being able to know for myself. A lot of times, like Karla was saying before, you'll get the coaches talking to you, so you feel always correct. And so it's like, what helped me to keep going was I knew that, okay, once all of these kids that are in our system are, that are at the program, once they're all into the automated system, we'll be able to see, we won't have to go back to the drawer. That was my big thing, is always having to, okay, let me get their file. That takes so much of your time up versus when they're sitting there and they're saying, okay, how many kids do you have in your preschool room? Being able to just go right there and press that button and say, I got 13 kids in this classroom right now, and knowing exactly their information was right there and I didn't have to go to a drawer and pull those files out. That's what kept me going, because having to go through the drawer every day, especially for the smaller centers, I feel like when I was doing this at home, had they approached me when I was a FCC provider, just a family child care provider, I probably would have said, I'm going to stick with doing my paper and pen because I have 6 kids and this is much easier for me to just do with my 6 kids. But being in a center, and even the FCC providers that want to bring on more kids, they will find out that going automated, it saves you so much time. And just being able to know what you're talking about instantly instead of having to go look it up, it means a lot to the person you're working with, because then you're not having to call them later on and say, you know what, I know I told you we had 16 kids, but no, I'm looking at our paperwork and we actually have 18 kids. And then on the flip side of that, with the stabilization grant, I could have lost money if I would have given them numbers that were smaller than what we actually provided for. So I'd have been doing myself a disservice. So I looked at how would it help me and how would it help my parents. So a little bit of selfishness, I would say, on my end is what kept me going, being honest with you, because I was just like going back to that drawer and pulling out every single file and having to go through. I was like, I'd rather be able to go right here and see this. So I had to see, for me, the instant gratification for me was knowing that, okay, when I'm done putting in all of the children's information, it's going to be just quicker with billing and everything. And it panned out that way too. So being able to see it for myself, that kept me going even more. And telling my staff, like, we've made it part of our onboarding process, that when a teacher comes on board, we're training them how to do that. And the more we learn about it, it makes it easier for everybody. And it's made it helpful for my CEO too. I'm able to give her correct reports on where our status is.
I'd like to follow up with a question. Once you went automation, did you have to save your papers? Is there a retention schedule? Or were you able to shred?
Because of the state requirements requiring us to keep the papers, we still kept those papers, but I would honestly say if I had it my way, I'd be like,
For a certain period of time and
you
then
do,
shred 'em.
and then you can shed them. Yes.
And all the news, all the CCMSs are great now. You guys all know this, that you can, even if you had paper documents, you could scan them and
Scan.
maintain them
Mhm.
in the
That was mine as well.
CCMS.
Yes.
I was gonna say you can scan and save them.
And that is something that Karla, this partnership with Southwest Human Development has really helped us understand is if state agencies aren't behind this, if we're not saying like automation is the future and we're going to make our processes and our policies aligned to truly eliminate, some of that administrative work, then it's really hard. So it's a pilot now. So we still have our requirements that are really burdensome. And so, Lanae and others that have been brave enough to participate in this are still doing both processes. So we really hope that with this phase one of our attendance automation that we'll be able to remove a lot of those barriers. But I do think that if states don't get out of the way, I think we could really, have a missed opportunity here. And I also, speak to the urgency that we have in spending these ARPA and CURSA funds. So we can't even consider a future without these technology investments. So, whatever we need to do to collaborate as states or, get more providers sharing how helpful this is going to be, we've got to make this the opportunity where we really catch up.
What we've been dealing with in Memphis, which I'm sure everybody has to some degree, is enrollment and retention of staff. Can you talk a little bit about how you support partners with just rebounding from the pandemic and, just encouraging them and motivating them to focus on enrollment and retention?
Yeah, so I can just speak to it a little bit because we're all really tired, right? Like we are the staffing crisis, really, whether it's a reshuffle or a resignation and what it's doing to the field, like it's heavy. I think a lot of what we do to support, and I hope Lanae has received this, is one is just listening and carrying that, right? Because some of this is out of control. I wish that I had the magic wand of, your staffing issue is solved and your staffing issue is solved. And so I really think it is in the relationship of carrying that heavy weight. And then we partner with the Arizona Toolkit that has the job bank. So all statewide, every provider statewide has access to that free of charge. DES has provided funding for that. And they have the job bank. And so we work. And so the ways that we can help them is correct job ads, correct job descriptions, help them with job postings. And then through the job bank, that goes out to seven career builders, Indeeds, those types of things. And then we'll hop on with a provider who's really struggling. I'm like, well, let's do your zip code and see what you're paying compared to your competitor, because maybe you need to up that. And so I've had, providers, not Lanae, who have been like, I'm only going to pay $12.80, and I'm like, okay, well, I just want you to know everyone in your zip code is 15 to 17. And so, you have a choice and you have a stabilization grant that is to stabilize childcare.
Yes.
And so we have those conversations as well. And then our team, and we have utilized this through our cohort meetings, and then the one-on-one is, once you get them in the door, how are you keeping them? How are you keeping them excited about this work and being engaged? Are you giving them a true onboarding process? Are you showing them where the bathroom is? Do they have a mentor? Are you giving them planning time that's paid? And so those are some of these immediate things that we're doing. And then at Southwest, we are working on we have some head starts and we have an amazing CDA workforce that we have internally. And so now we're looking at, hey, can we offer this to the community as a benefit? So Lanae says, hey, staff, come here because I can get you a CDA free of charge through this partnership. And then we work with them. She allows them to have some paid time to do their class. We have mentors that go and watch, and then now that's a benefit that staff wants to stay there. So we're trying to do a lot of things that we can do, but I think right now we just have to hold space that this is heavy. It's heavy.
I hope that helps. It's interesting too. We saw, so in Arizona, we have CCDF authorizations for children, and then of course, like what we reimburse. And in the past, when our rates were so low, we saw that utilization of the subsidy at about 70%. And our hypothesis was, even with the CCDF subsidy, families still weren't able to afford that difference in the cost for care. But since we've raised our rates up, we've been seeing a trend of like closer to 60% utilization. And what we're hearing is parents can't find available childcare. So it's it's a supply issue right now. And again, if we had real-time supply and demand information, we wouldn't have to get in this situation, and families frantically calling here or there, and providers having spots available, right, that they would want to fill. So it is an interesting trend. Our last month, we saw utilization tick back up a little bit. So, and I'm hearing providers are having a little bit of an easier time staffing up. So I don't know. It's tough though. Great question.
We have the waiting list, right? Parents need the spots as soon as we get the staffing. Another thing that we did, I'd be amiss if I didn't mention, is in our expansion, we've integrated a leadership program as well to help those providers become really good leaders to retain those staff. And so we have 2 of our assistant directors here who have developed that program and have integrated, can't speak today, integrated now this leadership piece for that staffing and retention as well. And so we are trying to hit it from every level that we can.
Thank you all so much. Oh my gosh, I was so panicked that we only had